What is up? Coach Emma here, and welcome back to the Fit Habit Life podcast, where we cut through the noise, talk real health and fitness, sustainable fat loss, and habits that actually work. And today, we've got a super special guest, Mike Millner. So, Mike is not only a nutrition coach, but he's also a business coach and helps other nutrition coaches build and scale their business. And he's been really helpful with my business personally. I'm part of the email collective. If you're a coach and you're not in there, you're crazy. It's a steal, really. But he has extensive knowledge in nutrition as well. And so today I just wanted to pick his brain and hear about him and his story. So introduce yourself, Mike.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I think you covered it pretty well. I've been in this industry for a long time, well over a decade at this point, and started because of my own struggles with nutrition in my body, and went from being an athlete growing up and then went to college, continued to play sports. Once I graduated, I had no more like built-in activity, but I had a lot of college kid habits, like eating and drinking a lot. So I gained a significant amount of weight very quickly. Didn't recognize myself, kind of had this identity crisis, like who am I if I'm not an athlete, which then led me to trying to lose weight as fast as humanly possible, which of course led me to lose weight and gain it back many times over. And I tried pretty much every diet under the sun, any quick fix, anything that promised me fast results, I was all in, and I would go at it 100 miles per hour, would lose a significant amount of weight very quickly, and I would gain it back just as quickly. And that cycle continued for longer than it should have, because I guess I'm a slow learner. So I kept doing the same thing, hoping for a different outcome. And ultimately, it was really when I found strength training. I think that was kind of the first pivotal moment where I realized I didn't have to do hours of cardio every day, which I thought that was what you want to lose weight, you do hours of cardio, even if you hate it. That was my mindset. And once I found strength training, it was actually something that I enjoyed doing, where I could see tangible progress outside of just the scale. And I did notice that a lot of people that I was working out with had similar struggles. Like nutrition was always the sticking point. So that's what got me into wanting to understand it. I felt like I was missing something. So I poured into educating myself on just nutritional science, human metabolism, how the body works. And that ultimately led me to finding kind of my own way out of the dark place that I was in. I had struggled with disordered eating tendencies, body dysmorphia, perfectionist tendencies, orthorexia, and ultimately was able to crawl out of that dark place, find a sustainable way of doing things that felt good for me. And that's why I wanted to pay it forward. So I started as a personal trainer, then became a nutrition coach, then launched my own nutrition coaching business, then started helping other coaches with their businesses. And that's kind of been my evolution in the industry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I feel like most coaches have gone through a similar journey. I've talked about on your podcast and others and on mine, my struggle with eating disorders and food relationship and trying all the fad diets under the sun. So I feel like that's very common. What was the catalyst? So you said strength training really helped you. Was there anything else that you started to notice that kind of helped you get out of that cycle?
Yeah, strength training was the first thing that got me off of the cardio hamster wheel, which I was very fortunate to get off of that, because I really didn't enjoy it. And I would just do like 2 hours a day of just pure misery. And I hated it every time. And when I discovered strength training, it was like a small local gym. And the guy who owned it was just like, first day I was there, he's like, if you want to look better, feel better, look better naked, love what you see in the mirror, you should not be doing cardio every day. And I was like, whoa, he's like talking right to me. He's like, strength training is how you shape your body. It's how you get the physique that you want. It's how you get your muscles to pop. And I was like, all right, sign me up. I'm in. So I signed up for like boot camp classes. And even though it wasn't necessarily the most effective strength training style, I could see clearly how I was progressing, like using 20-pound dumbbells and then 30s and then 40s and 50s and continuing to progress. And that was good for just like the motivation and to keep going. And then I would say the second catalyst was I struggled a lot still with nutrition, like I mentioned, and I noticed a lot of the people at the gym that I was going to, they would do these 6-week challenges, which were like the old school sign up for quote unquote free, but you pay a deposit, and if you lose 20 pounds in 6 weeks, you get your money back, and if not, you don't. And so a lot of people at the gym were doing those types of challenges, and I started noticing that they would lose the weight, they would gain it back after the challenge, so they would hit their goal, and then like weeks later, they'd be right back to where they started. And I was in that same cycle, and I'm like, what are we all doing wrong? And so, I had tried a bunch of different things, a bunch of different diets, and there was a guy that I was following on T Nation. He was writing a bunch of articles on T Nation, and I just really resonated with the way that he communicated. So his name is Christian Thibodeau. So I reached out to him randomly, didn't think that I would get a response, and he was like, hey, I've got some time if you want to jump on a Skype call. And I was like, okay, he's in Canada. And I was like, sure, let's do it. Mike, here's somebody that I've been following for a while that I look up to, and he's just like open invitation. Well, we ended up talking for over 2 hours, and
Oh, wow.
he didn't charge me for the conversation. It was just like wanted to hear about my journey and what I was going through. And he kind of opened my mind to the fact that he was like, everything that you've been doing, you've been trying to follow somebody else's plan. Like you've been trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. He was telling me about like my personality type and the tendencies that I have and my behaviors and all this stuff. He's like, why don't you try something that's actually built for you and stop trying to fit yourself into somebody else's plan? And that was like the first real light bulb moment that I recognized all of the stuff that I had tried. He was right. It was like the classic cookie cutter food rules, the food restriction, you do the same plan as everybody else. And if we're all individuals and we understand that we're all unique, then why would we assume that we can do what everyone else does and get the same results? And so that was just like a logical way of breaking down my beliefs. And then I hired him to coach me. And the next 12 weeks of working with him were probably more significant than like the previous 12 years of like struggling to find my way. It all made so much sense because it was built for me and my lifestyle and what my body was responding to, and my, everything made sense because it was purely tailored to me. And that was like the main catalyst that really sparked the whole transformation that I experienced, that, started to feel more confident about, like I can actually do this. I can keep the weight off. I can live a healthy lifestyle. I can have balance. I can enjoy myself. And it wasn't an overnight process, but that was really the biggest thing that I would say completely shifted my mindset and my belief that it was doable.
That's crazy. That's awesome. So what specifically did you guys start to implement that kind of helped you see that this was working and that you could maintain it?
Yeah, I would say the biggest initial change was just like the nutrition plan and helping me understand like what my body was responding to, what was easier for me to adhere to. 'Cause that was the biggest thing. It wasn't just about, is this working? It's like, can you stick with this? Can you stay consistent with this? Does this make sense for your lifestyle? And then helping me, because previously I was like the classic case of restrict really hard during the week and then have zero willpower left for the weekend. So I would undo all of my progress. So I would literally watch the scale go down, 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 and then shoot back up higher than where I started on, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was the classic diet starts Monday person. I'm like, all right, here we go. I got to undo all this damage again, Monday through Friday. Same thing. I would be extremely, extremely restrictive. And so he helped me find a way of like, let's not make your weekdays like that. And let's not make your weekends as crazy as they are. So it was like finding that middle ground where I could still enjoy some more flexibility on the weekends, and not be as strict during the week. Like it was all about consistency and can you actually adhere to this? Does this make sense for your lifestyle? So I was finding the right combination of macros, the right food choices that worked for me, the right structure of my meals and everything around my training. And it was just, everything just made so much sense because it was truly a matter of like, can you stick with this? And that was the number one metric that we were looking at. And then of course the results just kind of happen as a byproduct.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's That's what I've noticed too. Like, if it's not sustainable, then it's just not going to stick. And most people, as you said, they're trying to fit like a square peg in a round hole and choose like one of those popular like fad diets and stuff and have their lifestyle fit it, but it's not built for them. And so that tends to be the problem and why most people, you know, they don't keep the weight off. So is that what you do with your clients?
Yep, that's pretty much it. There's no secret sauce to what we do. It is very much the same exact approach. It's personalizing everything, helping the individual understand what their body responds to, what makes them feel their best, what food choices work well for them, how to structure their meals and everything based off of their schedule. I think that's, you can look at, obviously, if you're dealing with more like high performers, you can look at training and, all right, we want to make sure we're fueling appropriately for your performance and we're recovering and all that stuff. But for everyday people, it should be based off of the lifestyle, and like the days that are more stressful at work aren't necessarily going to look the same as the days that you don't have as much on your plate. And do you travel? Like, we work with a lot of clients who, travel for work, or they have busy schedules, or juggling, family life and work life and social life and all this stuff like that really comes into play. It's food is not just fuel, and it's not like we're never just eating in a, controlled environment. Usually there's a bunch of moving parts and variables. So we have to understand how to accommodate for that stuff. What do you do when you're on the road for work? Or what do you do when your friends are telling you to live a little and have a few extra drinks or whatever the case may be? That's the real magic. Like, that's the real magic of coaching. It's not that we have some secret formula to give you like the best ever macro plan. And the best macro plan in the world doesn't matter if you can't stick to it, if it doesn't make sense for your lifestyle. So I find that it's the lifestyle piece, which encompasses a lot. It encompasses your mindset and your behaviors and your habits and routines and your work life, your family life. But that is where the bulk of progress is actually made and kept, and not so much, the specific training program that you're doing or the specific macro formula that you're using. It's more about the everyday lifestyle stuff that actually moves the needle.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So you were saying that you use specific tools to help your clients see how different meals kind of react to them and their bodies. What do you use to kind of measure that and to help them figure out what actually works?
Yeah, so we're doing some like basic subjective and objective data. For objective data, we're looking at how they're physically progressing with scale, measurements, progress pictures, how their clothes are fitting, things like that. And then subjectively, we're looking at their energy levels, their mood, their sleep, their stress, digestion, hunger, cravings. So we're just taking a look at, is your body responding well? Are you noticing after a certain meal that you're bloated or constipated? Are you noticing that you feel more energetic or more lethargic? Are you noticing any brain fog? If we're focusing on a meal before your workout, did you have a lot of energy? Did you crash and burn halfway through? What was your recovery like post-workout? So you just really want to get a sense of how their body's responding. And then we also have a registered dietitian and 2 functional nutritionists on our team. So we can
Oh,
always
awesome.
go the blood work path, but we always use that as a last resort. And I think a lot of times people want to jump to that first, but most of the time we can make, like 99% of the time, we can get there with just nutrition and lifestyle modifications. If there's a situation where somebody needs a deeper dive, we have to we want to look at blood work. We want to see if there's anything going on from a gut health perspective or a hormone perspective. We can go down that rabbit hole, but we usually reserve that for last case, last resort.
Awesome. Yeah, yeah. I just started going through the FNMS specialization with Sam, and the way I structured my program is like you got to do the basics first because usually most of those things are going to kind of resolve those like gut issues and hormone issues and other things. And so that's kind of this I take the same approach because it's like why spend hundreds of dollars on like a GI map or like blood work when you're not even eating protein with every meal or
Yeah,
walking, right?
exactly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Cool. So how did you get a registered dietitian to work with you guys, and what was the deciding factor in adding one to your team?
She was actually a former client. So she was
Oh,
somebody that went through our program. We've worked with a lot of coaches, trainers, nutritionists, RDs have come to us as clients, which is always fun. They're usually some of the most difficult clients, if I'm being honest, because we know too much. But it's like we assume that just because we know it, that means that we're automatically going to do it. But that's not the case. I know me personally, I would never want me as a client. I'm the worst client. So we have. So yeah, she was an amazing client though, and saw incredible progress and just really loved our philosophy and what we were all about. And it was just a conversation that was, she was like, if you're ever looking for anybody to join your team, it would be so fun. And we just kept that conversation going. I think it was like maybe 3 to 6 months after she stopped working with us, and we had been having those chats. And then I was hiring, and I thought it would be cool to have somebody with that skill set. And so yeah, we made that move, and it's been great. And it definitely adds, a layer of security for our clients, knowing that if there is anything that does require more of a deeper dive, we have the team in place that can help them with that.
that's awesome. Yeah, and did the functional nutrition coaches, did they go through something like Sam's thing, or are they like functional practitioners?
Yeah, they went through FDN.
Okay.
So yeah, they get the certification of being able to order labs and look at blood. Yeah, so it's wanted to make sure that it was like that we were covered legally if we ever wanted to do anything with like ordering blood work and being able to do that. And that's where having the RD. There's certain things that the RD can do that the functional nutritionist can't, but there's a lot that the functional nutritionist can do that the regular coaches can't. So we kind of have layers of coaching that we can go through.
That makes sense. That's smart. How many coaches do you guys have on your team?
At this point, we have a core group of like 6, which is smaller. I've had as many as like 15 at our peak,
Oh
but then
wow.
as I've been doing more on like the business coaching side of things, I've kept, because I had a lot of part-timers who were like more specifics. Like we don't work with a lot of men, but I had a part-time coach just in case, because we'll get some men come in here and there. And so I kind of had more like specialists for different areas. We kind of trimmed that down, and we just have like our core group now of about 6 coaches.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Cool. So I'm gonna pivot the conversation a little bit.
Sure.
How has your like fitness journey and relationship to food evolved over the past like decade, from when you first started your business and started to see those results to like now?
Yeah, I would say I I think something that not a lot of people talk about is when you have disordered eating tendencies, and I grew up with it. Like I experienced from a very young age that like my mom was always on a diet and counting points and doing all of like the traditional fads and things like that. And Weight Watchers was huge at that time. And then my oldest sister had a real severe bout with anorexia, almost lost her life. My other sister
Sorry to
had
hear
some
that.
issues, body image issues, and so I definitely was exposed to that at a young age. So I was susceptible to kind of a similar relationship with food, and that definitely, for me, it was more obsessive. It was more like, if you tell me I can't eat something, like I'm never going to eat it type of mindset. And I definitely went down that rabbit hole of like only clean foods. Just basically orthorexia is an obsession with clean eating. And so I was like the type of person where we go out to eat and I would order a salad, but no dressing, no cheese, not like, just give me raw vegetables. Don't cook anything in oil. Just use spray. I just want like chicken and salad and everything is raw. I was like that type of person, that extreme. And it just wasn't healthy. And it gave me anxiety every time I would think about going out. I would, my friends would want to go hang out and like grab dinner and drinks. And it would give me like crippling anxiety. And I would have to come up with excuses as to why I couldn't do it, and would fake being sick. And, it kind of got to a point where I was like sitting on my couch with a plate of chicken and broccoli, and I'm like alone on like a Saturday night eating chicken and broccoli on my couch. And I'm like, well, I guess it's just me and my chicken and broccoli. Like, this is all I have in my life now. So if this is where I'm heading, I don't think that's like, and sometimes you don't even realize that you're moving away from your values when you have something that is so consuming. And like almost every minute of every day, I was thinking about food or thinking about my next meal or thinking about how I could stay even more consistent and more perfect. And it moves you away from like, I value family and I value friendships and I value relationships and experiencing life. And now I'm doing all the opposite of that. So I think I'd be lying if I said that those thoughts just disappear completely and they never resurface. And it's the same thing with like body dysmorphia. I had a very distorted view of my body. I would look at myself as a very lean individual and I'd pick myself apart and look at all my quote unquote problem areas. And that same thing, like the body dysmorphia still rears its ugly head from time to time. There's still times like to this day where I'll look and my abs are a little bit faded. So I'm like, oh my God, you're so fat. What's wrong with you? And then I'm like, wait, nope. And now I think the evolution is my ability to catch those thoughts, to sit with them, to not just suppress them, to understand why they're there and what purpose they're serving, and then to still have full control over my actions and what I want to do with that. So I would say that's the biggest change that I've experienced and the growth that I've experienced is I can hear those disordered thoughts and not try to push them away, and not try to suppress them where they just bounce back even stronger. But I can just sit with it and I can listen to it and I can understand it. And then I can still have the final say of what I want to do with that and make a productive choice moving forward. And it's not always perfect. I definitely still have times where the, restrict and binge cycle sometimes will show back up, but it's the recoverability of how quickly can I turn the page and get back to feeling like myself again. And that recovery time or that turnaround time just gets shorter and shorter with more experience.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We have a very similar kind of background because I was also orthorexic for a period of time, and same thing. I would not go and to events with friends or have a drink or go out to eat, or I'd order like boiled chicken breast and salad without a vinaigrette or whatever. And it took like a third party perspective to get me to realize, oh, this is not healthy. What are you doing? You're going away from what the ultimate goal was originally, right? So thank you for sharing that. And I did not know that. So that's how did you like shift that mindset, and how were you able to kind of listen to those thoughts and then have a conversation with them, but not allow them to dictate your actions? Because I think a lot of people have those kind of like inner demons in their heads trying to get us to do what is comfortable, but not necessarily aligned with our goals.
Yeah, completely. Well, I would say the thing that helped me the most was therapy. So to having somebody teach me that the process of my natural inclination is to suppress. So if I have uncomfortable feelings, I just for my whole life, really, it was just push it down. Don't show the emotions, just stuff them down. And that never works very well. So I learned, when you have these patterns that come up in your life, and that's one thing that I will say I do pretty well. Pattern recognition is something that I'm pretty good at. So when I see something that repeats itself, I start to ask questions. I start to like get curious, like, well, wait a minute, this has happened. I've seen the same pattern before. Why is this happening? And when you have these destructive patterns that keep repeating themselves, that's like your siren should go off. Like, what am I doing that continues to, it's, toxic relationships or money issues or losing weight and gaining it back. Like these patterns that keep showing up, you want to raise that red flag and start to get curious about why is that happening. So that was the first thing, was just recognizing the patterns that existed that I didn't want in my life anymore. And then getting the help and developing the tools to navigate that, which for me was therapy. That was really helpful for me to develop the skill set of like, what do I do when my natural inclination is to push those feelings away? Well, I had a great therapist who gave me kind of some prompts to go through of asking questions about that and paying attention and tuning in, and then being able to, work through it, which took practice. So I had to, actively go through that and fight against the inclination of being like, no, just ignore it. So then that would set off the alarm in my head, like, wait a minute, that's what I would normally do. Let me try this prompt that my therapist gave me and just see how it fits. And at first it's awkward and you're like, oh, this is stupid. Why am I doing it? And then you keep doing it more and you're like, oh, this is actually helpful. It's making me feel pretty good about my ability to cope with this. So that was it. That was just, recognizing that there were things in my life that I didn't want to be there anymore, getting the help and the support that I needed to learn how to deal with it, and then putting it into practice. And I think that's the biggest thing that so many people miss. The information itself doesn't change anything. And sometimes it feels good to learn. Like we almost like intellectualize the solution. Like, well, I learned about trauma and I learned about, my nervous system and how to regulate it. And I learned how to do these breathing exercises. You learned how to, but did you do it? Did you put it into practice? Did you take the action? Sometimes learning about it feels, and you can even repeat it to other people. Be like, oh, I know exactly how to do this. I know exactly how to, navigate these uncomfortable emotions. And I can explain it to you perfectly, which is great, but it doesn't do anything unless you do it. So just being able to regurgitate it or repeat it or teach somebody else how to do it, that's all well and good, but nothing will actually change or get better until you put those things into practice. And that is a trick that our minds play on us all the time, because we know something, we automatically assume that we're doing it, but knowing and doing are very different.
Yes, yeah, totally agree. Something that I do check-ins with my clients every week, like via Zoom, and I was talking to my coach about it because he only does it for the first month, and then it's a Loom check-in, and he says like because I thought I needed to have these because my clients, when they show up, it gives them that like motivation boost, like they're doing something, but then when we're not in the call, that's when they drop off. And so them showing up to the meeting and learning and talking with me gives them that like win, that like, oh, they're doing something and they're moving towards their goal. But then when they're not with me and they're not in the call, they're not actually doing the things all the time. So I'm actually going to move away from that because, again, it's like a very similar thing. It's like you're listening to all the podcasts, you're watching all the Instagram fitness coaches, like following them on Instagram and listening to them about do your 8,000 steps a day, have protein and all this stuff. You're downloading the guides, but if you're not like using them and you're not applying the information, you're not going anywhere. So that was a good point.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, and thanks for sharing that too, because it is, I guess now it's less, more people are opening up about therapy and stuff. Like I'm in it as well, and it's been really helpful. But thank you for being vulnerable, because sometimes that can be tough to talk about. But I think most people kind of need it, at least some type of therapy, because it's hard to get out of your own way. And having that like third person kind of perspective on your life and unhealthy patterns that you exhibit is like super beneficial.
Yeah, I think the stigma around therapy is kind of ridiculous. Like we automatically assume that it means something is wrong, and it doesn't have to be wrong. It's like you can practice healthy habits without being unhealthy, right? Like there doesn't have to be a negative starting point to say that therapy is useful or helpful. There are certain things that are beneficial no matter what the context is, and I believe, and maybe it's not for everybody, but I believe that it's beneficial in pretty much every context. It doesn't mean that somebody's broken. It doesn't mean that something's horribly wrong. It doesn't mean that you're damaged. Like I think that immediately when we hear therapy, we're like, oh, what's wrong with that person? And I think hopefully we can start to remove that narrative, because I just don't think it's true at all.
Yeah, I agree. When growing up, it was like really common that only people in therapy had problems. It was more prevalent. Like now it's more of the norm to leverage that tool and utilize it. And I think I'm very glad about that, because as a kid, I was in therapy and it was not something I would have talked about openly, I guess. So yeah, that's awesome. And so how do you work through like mindset hurdles with your clients? What are some tools and techniques you use to help them overcome common pitfalls and falling off, like the weekend fall offs and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, so it's a one that needs to be talked about and communicated, and then we like to put the client in the driver's seat and give them full autonomy over their choices. And I think that's the biggest thing is we remind our clients all the time, nobody's forcing you to do this. Like nobody cares if you lose weight, nobody cares if you prioritize your health. You did this for you. No, there's like this is your goal, this is your body, this is your life. So the first thing is just reminding them, and I think sometimes you can feel this pressure for some reason, like I have to do this for XYZ, but you really don't. It has to be an internal motivation. And if you're doing this for somebody else or you're doing this for some other reason outside of yourself, it's really difficult to stay consistent with it. So a lot of times with like the weekends, if that's, the common roadblock, it's like, well, what do you actually want? Do you want to be healthy and fit, or do you want to say YOLO every weekend and enjoy yourself? And there's no right or wrong. And again, it's like the reminder of nobody's forcing you to do one thing versus the other. You get to choose from a place of what do you actually want. So we really want to make sure that when they're making the decision, that it's their own decision and that they're recognizing like I own this choice. So if the choice is like, you know what, I really don't enjoy going off the walls every weekend, I would like to be healthier and get control over that. Okay, great. Well, now let's talk about what are the things that cause the situation, the roadblock to get the best of you. So then we can start to get like more tactical, like what is kind of like the trigger that leads to the negative behavior? Because there's usually something, that's recurring. It's like, well, I do well until XYZ thing happens. And then how do we replace that with like a more productive, so they're getting something out of it. Like, well, anytime my friends tell me to just, have an extra drink, I always listen. Okay, well, why? What are you getting out of that? Well, it makes me feel close to them. Was there any way that you could feel close to them without getting the extra drink? Well, yeah, I could, get like a club soda instead, but I just like the act of drinking. That's actually a common one where we're in a social setting and it's not necessarily the alcohol itself. It's just the act of drinking with your friends, and like get a club soda with lime, get a splash of cranberry juice in there and make it nice and pink. And you'll feel like you're having a fancy cocktail with your friends. You'd be surprised at how often that works. It's just like replacing the feeling with something that's healthier, but provides the same feeling. And so we got to figure out like, what is it that every negative decision or poor behavior is still serving a purpose. We don't just do things just because. And like our bodies and our brains are way more nuanced than that. And we're not just like randomly making decisions just because. We're getting something out of it. Even negative situations, like when somebody stays in a toxic relationship, usually it's because the toxic relationship is predictable and familiar, and that provides safety. Even though it's toxic, but it's comfortable because they've been in it for so long, it feels secure. Like the devil you know. So if we understand what it's serving, what purpose is that serving, or what is the negative behavior doing for you, then we can replace it with something that does the same thing for you, but isn't having a detrimental impact on your health and your results. So that's kind of how we help them work through it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's kind of, have you, at the Real Coaches Summit, Jeb Stuart Johnston did like a talk on, so he helps people with binge eating disorder because he noticed it was very similar to what he struggled with, which was alcoholism. And so he talks about like your inner demon and those coping mechanisms or patterns that you've developed are there because they keep you comfortable and keep you safe or give you some sort of relief or something, like you said, like being close with their friends so they get the extra drink even though it's detrimental to their goals. So he talks about coming up, like you said, with other ways to get that same feeling and to kind of cope with it in a better way. So that's cool. I've been noticing a lot of that, like a lot of coaches are talking about that, and it's something I'm starting to implement with my clients as well, because I think usually the hurdles aren't really like knowing what to do. It's like figuring out how to shift from those like patterns that you have and creating better ones that help lead you to your goals that you want, or realizing that you don't want the goals as much as you thought you did.
Yep, which is also a win. That's like being able to say, this isn't as important to me as I thought it was, so I'm just going to keep doing this other thing over here. That's great. Like as long as you're comfortable with that and that's what you want, ultimately you should be making decisions that move you closer to what you want. So if you can get in alignment with that, it's great. The issue is when there's a dissonance, like your actions and your words are mismatched. So you're saying you want something, but your actions tell a different story, and it creates this internal stress. So as long as we can get those things aligned, regardless of what the decision is, that's a win for any individual.
Yeah, definitely agree. So don't want to keep you longer. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Where can the listeners find you, and what would you like to leave the listeners with today?
So they can find me on Instagram at coach_Mike_Millner, 2 L's in Millner. And they can find me on my podcast, which is called Mind Over Macros. And they can listen to the episode that we did together on my show. You can just search Mind Over Macros on any podcast platform and take your pick of any episode titles that resonate with you. There's a lot to choose from. So we're over 700 episodes now. So just start whatever episode title grabs your attention. And then to leave the listeners with something, I would just say what we were just talking about is really where the real magic happens with what I call friction points. So I have a good friend of mine who's a psychologist, and he did some research for his PhD program, and it was related to health, and basically was trying to figure out where the health journey goes astray. And what he figured out was that a lot of people who are trying to prioritize their health, they do a lot of things well, but then they reach these friction points or these fork in the road decision. And usually it doesn't seem like much in the moment. They seem pretty inconsequential. Like it's the moment where you're out to dinner with your family and the server comes around and is like, what do you want for dessert? What do you want for dessert? And you have this fork in the road, and you're like, I can either say no to the dessert, or I can get the dessert, or I could have a taste of dessert or whatever. And it's like that moment that doesn't seem like much. And it's not in and of itself, having a dessert in one dinner versus not is not going to move the needle. But what he found was that when you have that friction point and you struggle with it, it spirals. And so he developed this process for helping people where they basically visualize, and the results were pretty profound. It was like, if you can predict the friction point ahead of time and actually visualize the exact process playing out how you want it to, you were like 90% more likely to follow through with what you actually wanted to do than if you just go in blind and hope for the best. So it was like, what are the actual words that you're going to say? And then it's trying to predict, like, okay, I'm going to say, no, thanks. I'm not going to have dessert tonight. And then it's like, is there going to be, the one relative or friend who's like, oh, what, you're not having dessert? What's wrong with you? And like practicing what you were going to say back to them. So it was the ability to predict those friction points, to plan ahead and visualize it, and then to imagine like the worst case scenario. And then one step beyond that was the people who were able to recognize that it still might not go the way that they want, but that's okay, to prevent the spiral. So if somebody's like, all right, I practice, I know, like I'm going to say no to the dessert, but then they end up getting it in the moment, it gets the best of them. Like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to get the chocolate cake. Great, they enjoy it, but they had already planned ahead of time. If I end up doing this, it's fine, I'm just going to turn the page quickly. And they actually were able to turn the page quicker than the people, once again, who just kind of went in and hoped for the best. So those little moments where it seems like you have this tough decision, fork in a road, they may seem small, but they actually mount up over time because they do create some spiral effect. And if you're trying to constantly like battle yourself and hope for the best, it's not it's not a great approach. So just remember, like, patterns leave clues. If you're always in the same positions, making the same decisions, just plan ahead and think about how you want to handle it, and then visualize it. And even if you don't make the best decision, it's okay. Just picture yourself turning the page quickly, and that will help you move the needle. quicker than pretty much anything else, in my opinion.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great thing to leave listeners with. And that was something. So in Jeb's talk about the like inner demon and stuff, part of it was visualizing yourself doing the thing and being in those situations when those patterns come up, and then how are you going to react and what might happen and what. So that makes a lot of sense. So great thing to leave our listeners with. And if you haven't listened to Mike's podcast, it's awesome. I listen to all of them as a coach, and it helps me on my journey. So definitely give that a listen. And I'll drop the email collective link in the show notes too, because if you are a coach, again, very dumb to not be in there. I will talk about it forever. So please join. And that's it for today. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.